The shuttle doors hissed as they released pressure, a blast of moist, oxygen-rich air rushing into the cabin. Aron Vega hesitated, his pale fingers tightening around the strap of his carry bag. His helmet's visor displayed the first glimpse of Earth, a sprawling research compound nestled in a forest so dense it seemed alive. The trees stretched impossibly high, their dark green canopies swaying gently in the wind. Aron had read about forests, seen simulations on Mars, but the sheer density and vibrancy of this one made his chest tighten. "Time to disembark," said a low, clipped voice. The pilot, a grizzled man with deep lines carved into his face, gave Aron a curt nod. "Keep your suit sealed until they say otherwise." Aron rose, his legs wobbling slightly under the weight of Earth's gravity. The 2-week journey from Mars to Earth had been grueling, the confinement of the shuttle amplifying his nervous anticipation. He stepped into the airlock, each movement deliberate, his survival suit's exoskeleton humming softly as it supported his frail Martian bones. Beyond the threshold, Earth awaited, a world he had dreamed of, feared, and now stood upon for the first time. The descent ramp extended, its metallic groans swallowed by the symphony of the forest. Birds chirped in chaotic patterns, insects droned unseen, and the wind whispered through the trees. Aron's visor adjusted automatically, dimming against the intense sunlight. He paused at the bottom of the ramp, his boots sinking slightly into the loamy ground. The sensation was alien, soft, unstable, alive. Aron Vega. A woman in a lab coat approached, her smile tight and professional. Her badge read, Dr. Elira Mendez, lead biologist. "Welcome to Earth. How are you feeling?" Aron swallowed, his throat dry. "Heavy," he said, his voice distorted through the suit's communicator. "Everything feels heavy." "That's expected," Mendez replied, her gaze scanning his suit. "We'll start acclimatization protocols immediately. Follow me." The compound loomed ahead, its architecture a stark contrast to the organic chaos of the forest. The buildings were blocky and gray, their windows tinted black. Razor wire fences circled the perimeter, and automated turrets tracked silently from their mounts. Aron couldn't shake the feeling that the place was less a research station and more a prison. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, filled with the faint hum of machinery. Aron's suit adjusted automatically, filtering out the overwhelming sense of Earth, the dampness, the greenery, the faint tang of something rotting. He followed Mendez down a series of corridors, his gaze darting to the shadowy corners where fluorescent lights flickered intermittently. Other staff members passed them, their expressions neutral, but their eyes wary. "Is it always this quiet?" Aron asked, his voice cutting through the stillness. Mendez glanced over her shoulder. "Out here, yes. The isolation is necessary for your safety, and ours." Before he could press further, they arrived at a large glass-walled room filled with medical equipment. Technicians bustled around a central pod-like structure, their murmured conversations blending into the background hum. Mendez motioned for Aron to step inside the pod, and he obeyed, feeling like an insect trapped under a magnifying lens. "Standard biometrics first," she said as the pod's panels slid shut around him. "This will take a few minutes." Aron closed his eyes as the machine whirred to life, scanning his body in excruciating detail. He focused on the rhythmic pulse of his own breathing, trying to ignore the knot of unease tightening in his chest. He had wanted this, had fought for the chance to experience Earth, to prove that a Martian-born could survive here. But now, standing in this cold, unfamiliar place, he felt a pang of regret. The pod hissed open, and Mendez offered him a handheld device. "Your baseline readings are good. Better than expected, actually. Use this to monitor your vitals. Any spikes, temperature, oxygen saturation, heart rate, report them immediately. Understood?" Aron nodded, clutching the device like a lifeline. Mendez led him to his quarters, a sparse room with a single bed, a desk, and a window that faced the forest. The view was breathtaking, the trees casting long shadows under the setting sun. Aron placed his carry bag on the bed and hesitated before approaching the window. He stared at the forest, its depths an impenetrable wall of green and shadow. As night fell, the landscape transformed, the darkness swallowing the vibrant colors he'd seen earlier. For the first time since landing, he allowed himself to remove his helmet, the seals releasing with a soft pop. The air was thick and humid, heavy with the scent of damp earth and vegetation. Aron took a tentative breath, then another, deeper this time. The weight of Earth's atmosphere pressed down on him, making each inhalation a conscious effort. Yet, despite the discomfort, he felt exhilarated. This was Earth, real, tangible, alive. The moment of awe was shattered by a sudden sound, a wet, clicking noise, faint but unmistakable. Aron froze, his heart pounding. The sound came again, closer this time, like the snap of bones wrapped in something viscous. He pressed his face to the glass, scanning the tree line, but saw nothing. A knock at the door made him jump. He turned to find a technician standing there, looking uneasy. "Lights out in 10 minutes," the man said, his gaze darting toward the window. "And if you hear anything at night, stay inside. Don't open the door." Before Aron could respond, the technician was gone, leaving him alone with the fading echoes of the clicking noise. He stared at the window for a long time, the shadows outside shifting as if alive. When he finally lay down, the sound of his heartbeat drowned out everything else. But as sleep claimed him, the clicking returned, soft and insistent, like a whisper on the edge of hearing. Aron's days at the compound blurred into a strange routine of physical therapy, acclimatization drills, and medical evaluations. Earth's gravity gnawed at his bones, each step a small act of defiance against the crushing pull of the planet. The research team monitored his progress obsessively, logging every ache, every twinge, and every drop of sweat. He could feel their eyes on him constantly, their whispers just out of earshot. The changes started subtly. His appetite became insatiable, an endless hunger that left him nauseated even after meals. The synthetic Martian food he had brought with him felt like ash in his mouth, so he began eating the earth-grown alternatives provided by the staff. Meat, in particular, seemed to soothe the gnawing emptiness in his stomach, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something about the flavor was wrong. His body responded violently to the new diet. Sharp pains racked his stomach, his muscles twitching uncontrollably during the night. He awoke drenched in sweat, the sheets beneath him soaked through. The mirror became his daily tormentor, reflecting a body that no longer felt entirely his own. His pale Martian skin began to peel in patches, revealing faintly translucent tissue underneath that shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. "Your body is adapting faster than anticipated," Dr. Mendez told him during one of their sessions. She studied the data on her tablet, her brow furrowed. "Faster than we've seen in any test case before." "What does that mean?" Aron asked, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. Mendez hesitated. "It's not unexpected. Earth's environment is radically different from Mars. Your biology has to adjust in ways we can't fully predict. But you're progressing well, remarkably well." Her words did little to reassure him. The ache in his bones had been replaced by a new sensation, one he couldn't quite describe. It wasn't pain, but a deep, unsettling awareness of his own body, as if it were a foreign landscape he was just beginning to explore. One afternoon, during a routine walk around the compound's perimeter, Aron stumbled upon the restricted zone. The fence was marked with faded warning signs, the path overgrown with thick vines and moss. Beyond it, the forest seemed darker, the air colder. Something about the area pulled at him, an almost magnetic sensation that made his head buzz. He stepped closer, gripping the rusted fence, and peered through the gaps. The buildings within were abandoned, their windows shattered and walls overrun with strange organic growths. The structures seemed to breathe, their surfaces rippling faintly as if responding to his presence. Aron's stomach churned. He was about to call out when a voice startled him. "Hey!" A security officer jogged toward him, his rifle slung low but his tone sharp. "You're not supposed to be here." "I didn't know," Aron lied, stepping back from the fence. The officer frowned, his eyes narrowing. "This area's off limits for a reason. Don't come back here. Understand?" Aron nodded, but the buzzing in his head didn't fade. As he walked away, he could feel the abandoned zone pulling at him, a gravitational force stronger than Earth's own. That night, the hunger returned with a vengeance. He tore into the steak he'd been served, his hands shaking as he devoured it. The taste of blood, rich and metallic, sent a shiver through his body, equal parts disgust and ecstasy. He finished the plate in seconds and found himself licking his fingers, the motion instinctive and animalistic. Afterward, he lay in bed, the clicking noise from the forest creeping into his thoughts. It had been growing louder each night, more distinct. Now it seemed to echo inside his skull, the rhythm matching the rapid thrum of his pulse. His dreams were feverish, filled with images of flesh twisting and splitting, of mouths where there shouldn't be mouths, of something vast and pulsing waiting for him. When he woke, his fingernails had grown jagged, their edges sharp enough to draw blood. His gums throbbed, and when he touched them, he felt the faint ridges of something hard pressing just beneath the surface. Panic gripped him as he stumbled to the bathroom mirror. The face staring back at him wasn't entirely his. His skin had become translucent in places, revealing a web of veins and faintly glowing tissue beneath. His pupils were dilated, his irises flecked with an unnatural, iridescent sheen. He staggered out of the bathroom and headed straight for Dr. Mendez's office. She was alone, reviewing data on her monitor, but she turned as soon as he entered, her expression tightening at the sight of him. "What's happening to me?" Aron demanded, his voice cracking. "This isn't normal. You know it isn't." Mendez hesitated, her fingers tightening around the tablet she held. "Aron, I need you to stay calm." "Calm?" He stepped closer, his breath coming in sharp bursts. "Look at me. This isn't acclimatization. Something is wrong." Finally, she sighed, the tension in her shoulders visible. "You're right. It's not normal. But we didn't bring you here just to adapt to Earth. There's something else. Something you needed to be exposed to." "What are you talking about?" Aron's voice dropped, a cold weight settling in his stomach. Mendez hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting someone to barge in. Then she lowered her voice. "We found something during a drilling operation 2 years ago. An organism buried deep in the earth. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Parasitic, invasive, and adaptive. It alters whatever it infects. This facility was repurposed to study it, to see how it interacts with different physiologies." Aron felt the blood drain from his face. "You brought me here to infect me." "No," she said quickly. "We didn't expose you directly. But the organism, it's everywhere in this region. The forest, the soil, the air. We needed to see how your Martian biology would respond to it." Aron stepped back, his stomach turning. "And you didn't think to tell me?" Before she could respond, an alarm blared through the compound, its shrill tone cutting through the tension like a blade. Mendez's face went pale. "What's happening?" Aron asked. She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "It's breached the perimeter." "What has?" Mendez didn't answer. Instead, she pulled him toward the door. "Stay close to me. And whatever you do, if you hear it, don't run." Her words sent a chill down Aron's spine, but he had no time to ask what she meant. The clicking noise had begun again, louder and closer than ever before. This time it wasn't coming from the forest. It was inside the compound. The alarms screamed through the compound, a chaotic symphony of flashing red lights and blaring klaxons. Aron stumbled through the corridor, his breathing labored under Earth's gravity. Behind him, Dr. Mendez barked orders into a handheld comms device, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Containment breach in sectors C and D. Lockdown protocols initiated. Non-essential personnel to the safe zone immediately." The clicking noise followed them, a grotesque rhythm that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. It wasn't a single source. There were multiple, overlapping clicks, their tempo erratic and unnervingly organic. Aron's skin crawled at the sound, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Whatever was making that noise wasn't human. They rounded a corner, nearly colliding with Grant, the compound's lead security officer. His rifle was raised, his face set in a grim expression. He didn't so much as glance at Aron, his attention fixed on Mendez. "How bad is it?" he demanded. "Worse than we thought," she replied, her voice clipped. "The organism isn't just breaching the perimeter, it's inside. I don't know how, but it's evolving faster than anticipated." Grant's jaw tightened. "We'll have to evacuate." "No," Mendez snapped. "We can't let it spread beyond the compound. If it reaches the forest..." "It's already in the forest," Aron interrupted, his voice shaking. "I've seen it out there. It's everywhere." Mendez and Grant exchanged a glance, their silence more telling than any words. Aron felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. You knew this could happen, didn't you? You brought me here knowing... Not now, Mendez cut him off, her tone sharp. If you want to survive, stay close and do exactly as I say. Before Aron could argue, the lights flickered, plunging the corridor into momentary darkness. When they came back on, the clicking noise was louder, closer. Aron's heart pounded as he turned toward the sound. At the far end of the corridor, something moved. It was barely visible in the dim light, a shifting mass of translucent, glistening flesh. The creature moved with an unnatural fluidity, its elongated limbs bending in ways that defied anatomy. Its body seemed to ripple and shift as if it were still deciding on a final shape. Aron's breath caught in his throat as he noticed its face, or rather the absence of one. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth, blank surface, marred by faint pulsations beneath the skin. "Run," Grant said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. "Now!" The creature lunged, its movements impossibly fast. Grant opened fire, the sharp crack of his rifle echoing through the corridor. The bullets tore into the creature, but instead of falling, it seemed to absorb the impact, its body rippling like water. Aron froze, his feet rooted to the ground as the creature let out a guttural, clicking roar that seemed to vibrate in his chest. "Go!" Mendez shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him down the hallway. They sprinted through the twisting corridors, the clicking noise following them like a relentless shadow. Aron's legs burned with the effort, his body still unaccustomed to Earth's gravity. Behind them, Grant's rifle fire grew fainter and then stopped altogether. Aron didn't have to look back to know what that meant. They burst into a larger room, a laboratory filled with shattered glass and overturned equipment. The air was thick with a sickly metallic scent, and the walls were smeared with dark, wet streaks. Mendez slammed the door shut behind them, her chest heaving as she locked it. "What the hell is that thing?" Aron demanded, his voice cracking. "It's not one thing," Mendez said, her eyes darting around the room. "It's part of the organism, a drone maybe, a fragment of something much larger." "Larger?" Aron's stomach churned at the thought. "How much larger?" Mendez didn't answer. Instead, she crossed to a console on the far side of the room and began typing furiously. Aron watched as a schematic of the compound appeared on the monitor, red dots spreading across it like a rash. "We're outnumbered," she muttered. "The central hive must be directing them." "The hive?" Aron asked, his voice rising. "What hive?" Mendez hesitated, then pointed to a section of the map marked with a warning symbol. "Beneath the abandoned wing. That's where the organism originated. It's the source." Aron's mind reeled. The abandoned wing. He'd seen it during his walk outside the compound. The place had felt wrong, its walls pulsing with an unnatural energy. Now he understood why. "So what do? "We destroy it," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "The hive is connected to all the drones. If we take it out, we might have a chance." "Might?" Aron repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. Before Mendez could respond, the door behind them buckled, a loud, wet thud reverberating through the room. The creature was still coming. Aron backed away as the door shuddered again, dents appearing in the reinforced metal. "We're out of time," Mendez said, grabbing a bag from one of the overturned desks. She pulled out a series of small cylindrical charges. We'll use these. The geothermal energy core runs directly beneath the hive. If we can set these charges, it should create a chain reaction strong enough to destroy it. Aron stared at her, his chest tight with fear. You're insane. Do you have a better idea? She shot back. The door gave another violent jolt, the metal groaning under the strain. Mendez shoved the bag into Aron's hands. You wanted to survive on Earth, right? This is how. The door finally gave way, crashing inward as the creature surged into the room. Mendez grabbed Aron's arm and pulled him toward a side door, the charges clinking in the bag as they ran. Aron didn't look back, but he could hear the creature following, its clicks growing louder and faster, almost frantic. They plunged into the stairwell leading down to the abandoned wing. The air grew colder, the walls slick with condensation. Aron's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps as they descended, the light from their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The clicking noise didn't stop. It followed them, relentless, a haunting reminder that escape wasn't an option. As they reached the bottom of the stairwell, Aron felt a strange vibration beneath his feet. The ground seemed to hum, a low, resonant sound that made his teeth ache. Mendez stopped at a heavy metal door, her hands trembling as she keyed in a code. The door creaked open, revealing the cavern beyond. The cavern vibrated with a low, bone-deep hum, the sound of something vast and alive, breathing just beneath the surface. Aron stood frozen, the sight of the hive searing itself into his mind. The mass in the center was incomprehensibly large, its surface glistening like oil-slicked flesh. Veins of bioluminescent light pulsed along its writhing appendages, each movement fluid yet grotesquely deliberate. The clicking noises that had haunted him for days now filled the air, overlapping and resonating in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. The hive wasn't just alive, it was aware. Aron could feel it probing him, its alien consciousness brushing against his thoughts like icy tendrils. It wasn't a language, not in the human sense, but it was trying to communicate. It knew him. "We have to move," Mendez hissed, breaking the spell. She pushed the bag of charges into Aron's hands, her face pale but determined. "We plant these along the geothermal conduits and detonate them remotely. The whole cavern goes, the hive with it." Aron's fingers trembled as he took the bag. His body felt foreign, heavier with each passing moment. His skin prickled, the translucent patches glowing faintly in the dim light of the cavern. The hunger gnawed at him again, sharper now, more urgent. "What happens if it doesn't work?" Aron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mendez hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the hive. "Then it's the end, for all of us." She turned and began laying the first charge, her movements methodical despite the oppressive atmosphere. Aron forced himself to follow, his boots squelching on the wet, organic ground. The closer he got to the hive, the stronger the vibrations became, resonating through his bones. Each step felt like walking into the maw of something waiting to devour him. As they moved, the hive responded. Its appendages twitched, and a wet, guttural sound echoed through the cavern. Aron froze as one of the tendrils uncoiled, its tip splitting open to reveal a glistening, tooth-like maw. It didn't attack, but hovered, swaying slightly as if studying him. "It knows you," Mendez whispered. What? Aron's voice cracked, the word barely audible over the cacophony of clicks. It's been inside you since you arrived. You're changing, Aron. It sees you as part of it. Her words sent a wave of revulsion through him, but deep down he couldn't deny the truth. His body wasn't just adapting to Earth, it was adapting to the organism. The translucent patches of his skin, the heightened senses, the gnawing hunger, all of it pointed to something inhuman growing inside him. He planted the first charge near a pulsating vein of the hive and stepped back. Mendez moved further along the cavern, setting the next one. The hive twitched again, its movements becoming more erratic. Aron's head throbbed, the alien presence pressing harder against his mind. It wasn't just probing now, it was pushing, trying to break through. A screech tore through the cavern, high-pitched and deafening. Aron spun around to see a swarm of drones spilling from the hive, their forms more horrific up close. They were smaller than the drone that had chased them earlier, but no less grotesque. Their translucent bodies writhed with exposed veins and organs, their limbs bending unnaturally as they crawled toward him. "Aron, get back!" Mendez shouted, her voice drowned out by the screeching. Before he could react, the drones were on him. Their limbs tore at his suit, their clicking mouths snapping inches from his skin. Aron screamed, the sound raw and primal as he fought them off. His strength surged, unnatural and overwhelming. He grabbed one of the creatures and crushed it in his hands, its body bursting in a spray of viscous fluid. He froze, staring at his own hands. His fingers were longer now, tipped with sharp, claw-like nails. The translucent patches on his arms glowed brighter, the alien tissue beneath pulsing in sync with the hive. He wasn't just fighting them, he was becoming them. "Aron, focus," Mendez's voice cut through the haze. She was backing toward him, her pistol raised as she fired at the approaching swarm. "We're out of time. You have to set the charges." But Aron couldn't move. The hive was in his head now, its presence overwhelming. He saw visions, fragments of memory that weren't his, a deep, dark place where the organism had slept for millennia, the drilling that had awakened it, the first human it had consumed, its cells spreading like wildfire, and now its connection to him. It didn't want to destroy him. It wanted to make him whole. "No," Aron whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm not yours." The words were met with a wave of anger that nearly brought him to his knees. The hive's tendrils lashed out, smashing into the walls of the cavern as the swarm closed in. Aron clenched his fists, the alien strength coursing through him, surging again. He wasn't sure if it was his own will or the organism's influence, but he moved, tearing through the drones with brutal efficiency. Mendez stared at him, her face a mixture of horror and awe. "Aron, what are you?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. His thoughts were a jumble of human and alien instincts, the line between them blurring. But one thing was clear. If they didn't destroy the hive, there would be nothing left of him, or anyone else. With a final, desperate push, they set the last of the charges. The hive convulsed, its screeches echoing like a dying animal. Aron could feel its rage, its desperation, as the tendrils lashed out toward them. "Go!" Mendez shouted, pulling him toward the exit. They sprinted up the stairs, the cavern shaking violently as the charges detonated one by one. The heat from the explosions was overwhelming, the sound deafening. Aron stumbled, his vision blurring as the alien tissue in his body reacted violently to the destruction of the hive. They barely made it outside before the ground gave way, the entire abandoned wing collapsing into the earth. The forest fell silent, the clicking noise gone, but Aron knew it wasn't over. He sank to his knees, his body trembling. His skin was almost entirely translucent now, the glowing veins beneath casting faint light onto the ground. His reflection in a puddle was barely recognizable. His eyes were larger, his features sharper, his humanity slipping away. Mendez knelt beside him, her voice soft but steady. "You saved us. You saved everyone." "No," Aron said, his voice hollow. "It's still inside me. I didn't stop it. I became it." She didn't argue. There was nothing to say. Aron stood, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked toward the forest, its shadows deep and endless. Somewhere in the distance, a faint clicking sound echoed. It wasn't the hive, it was him. Without another word, he began walking into the trees, his glowing form disappearing into the darkness. Mendez watched him go, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had lost and what they had unleashed. The forest swallowed him, leaving only silence behind.